Good morning. Welcome to Seattle Atheist Church. Atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, skeptics, whatever you like to call yourself, you are welcome here. At Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because you will never hear anything supernatural talked about from the pulpit. So today we're talking about religion without God. And many people take it for granted that the purpose of going to church is to worship God. Most people believe that to be religious means worshiping one or more gods. But there's a long tradition of religion without God. And of course, religions without God might be called philosophies. But they are religions. And religion is just a subset of philosophy. So I'm talking about some forms of Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Daoism, Confucianism, Stoicism, Cynicism, Epicureanism, and even Spinozanism, which are all different religions or different belief systems that don't believe in God. I have never heard of Spinozism being called a religion before, but we're going to talk about him today. Not all atheists draw the same conclusions about the big questions in life, but how we view our world, our place in it, how we think about right and wrong, and our obligations to our fellow people, as atheists, what we have in common is that we can't attribute any of that thought process to having anything to do with God. And it's been asked of atheists before, why don't we also don't believe in leprechauns. We also don't believe in unicorns. So why not call yourself an a-leprechaunist or an a-unicornist? Well, just 7 years ago, 82% of Americans in a major poll said that they believe in God. 82%. And as recently as 5 years ago, only 2.4% said that they identified as atheists, or saying that they believe that God probably does not exist. So the reason that we talk about atheism and not a-leprechaunism or a-unicornism is because we still live in a worldwide culture where there's a pull and a social pressure toward believing in God, not leprechauns or unicorns. The daily struggle to face the truth and live in reality is worth naming. Obviously, one of these ancient religions could have an entire talk of its own, even a seminar of its own. And I'm going to be touching on them in a superficial way just to show that the concept of God that many Westerners today take for granted is far from an obvious conclusion and far from necessary for thinking about how to live your life in a moral way. In some cases, if a religion did have a god or gods, those gods may have been fallible. So think of the Greek and Roman gods with their personality flaws, or in some cases, in the religious traditions I'm about to talk about, there are gods, but they're just completely uninterested or incapable of intervening in human life. So the things that many Westerners take for granted about God being God, that it must be an all-powerful God or capable or desirous of interfering in human lives, is not present in these religions. So Jains, for example, do have a concept of God. And my information about Jainism I'm taking from the BBC blog. They believe that there is no God that created or maintains the universe. Because an immaterial being cannot create a material universe. There is no God of judgment. There is no God who would be obeyed. There is no God compared to whom we humans would be inferior. There is no God that demands worship. In fact, a perfect being would have no interest in human beings worshiping them at all. There's no God who helps people. They don't believe in a God who will respond to prayer or intervene in the world. The beings that they worship are beyond human contact and cannot intervene in the world. Any being that desires anything, such as human beings to worship them, would not be perfect, and therefore could not be God. Okay, Buddhism is one that most of us are familiar with, and that Buddhism teaches life contains suffering, which is caused by cravings or desires, and this suffering can be overcome by various methods, mainly by acknowledging in the moment and accepting what is. This practice through which a person can attain enlightenment. And these are this belief system is based on the teachings of Gautama Buddha, who is considered a person and not a god. An enlightened being, perhaps, but not a god. And there are many branches of Buddhism, and some of them actually do involve worshiping gods, but the belief in God is not inherent in the belief in Buddhism. Daoism. Taoists also do not believe in a personal God. Ancient Taoism, in fact, was a precursor to the modern scientific method and taught that empirical observation and being in harmony with nature was how to live a good life. Confucianism. Confucianism focuses on family harmony and social life, and it focuses on rules for right action in the 5 key relationships, which are ruler and subject, wife and husband, older and younger siblings, friends to friends, and father and son. Stoicism. The Stoics focused on living in harmony with the divine reason that governs nature and becoming indifferent to pleasure and pain by bending one's own will so that one can accept whatever is one's fate. And I did look that up because I was talking about that with somebody who was questioning if that was the case, and that is, I believe, what Stoics believed, having studied Stoicism at one point. So here's what the Stoics actually said about God, and I quote, "Divine reality pervades the universe. There are 2 kinds of matter, the gossamer matter that is seen and touched, and finer matter called breath or spirit that holds everything together." It was given various names: logos, reason; pneuma, breath; pronoia, providence; Zeus, fire, reason. The Stoic God was described as perfectly good and wise gas. So as far back as 3rd century BC in ancient Greece, we have a concept of God which is something natural, as opposed to supernatural, and which is completely indifferent to human beings. Okay, so Stoicism is a religion founded by Zeno, and I'd like to move now from Zeno in 3rd century BC to Spinoza in the mid-17th century. Okay, there was this remarkable person named Baruch or Benedict Spinoza. He was a Spanish Jew, and so living in Amsterdam, he went by various different names. And he is the exact sort of person who I would love to celebrate at heresy. So for those of you who are visiting our church today, heresy is a tradition or holiday that Seattle Atheist Church celebrates around Christmas time, where we celebrate people of intellectual honesty and who during their lifetimes were labeled as heretics. So at 23, Spinoza was excommunicated from Jewish society, and the Catholic Church also banned all of his books. And he was attacked on the synagogue steps by a knife-wielding assailant who shouted heretic and stabbed him. So he then kept for years and wore the torn cloak unmended as a souvenir. And so this December, when we celebrate heresy, I'm contemplating wearing a torn garment. Okay, that might sound crazy, but the point of religion, in my opinion, is to have rituals which help us to pause and see things in a new way, and using those relevant rituals to celebrate the things that we value, and in this case, valuing the intellectual honesty and bravery of thinking for oneself. So Spinoza is famous for saying that God is nature, not Latin for nature created, but Latin for nature doing what nature does, or literally nature naturing. According to Wikipedia, he believed that a personal relationship with God came from the position that one is part of an infinite, interdependent organism. In a sense, then, humans are one with God, which is intertwined cooperation and competition for survival, growth, destruction, stasis, and the fluidity of everything that exists. Nature is all there is, and nature is God. Okay? So why call this God at all? Why not call it nature and leave it at that? Why not call it reality and leave it at that? And so those of you who are familiar with me know that I had a long journey that passed through liberal Christianity and basically this idea of identifying, kind of like almost worshiping the forces of the universe, which ultimately are nature, and then eventually just dropping out the God part and saying, there's a lot to be in awe of, and to be, there's a lot to understand and all of that. But, Spinoza is in the mid-17th century, and he calls that God. He claimed that everything happens because of a long change of cause and event, and that human beings sometimes just don't have the perception, they don't have enough information to understand everything that went into the cause and effect. Okay, so a lot of interesting stuff there, and contemplation for sort of what does it, how might we think about our lives and our relationship to the world and to each other if we had that perspective. Now, there's this other fellow whose name is Ronald Dworkin. Dworkin was a legal scholar, constitutional scholar, who's the second most cited legal scholar of the 21st century. And he wrote a book called Religion Without God. And the reason that I'm kind of juxtaposing him with Spinoza is because as a modern person, his position was kind of surprising. He is an atheist. Oh, and I might also add, for people who don't know, usually part of Seattle Atheist Church is that we believe in both atheism, meaning we're pretty sure God doesn't exist, and therefore we use scientific naturalism to explain how everything does exist, and to try to understand the world. But Ronald Dworkin rejects naturalism. He does not believe that everything that can be described through evolution, or that, and he also, the idea that human beings value something is what gives it value. So he believes that things have an objective importance independent of humans. And he does not think that what is moral can be explained by what is useful for the survival of our species. He believes that what is sublime exists as apart and independent from humans. He also sort of rhapsodizes about nature. And certainly, in fact, we've had a whole, we had a talk here, I think it was on wonder, right? On wonder, and the fact that atheists can certainly feel wonder, because that's another thing that a lot of people will ask you, don't you think there's something greater than yourself? Yeah, I do. So a belief in God is not required because you believe that there is something greater than yourself, and a belief in God is not required for religion. And in fact, a belief in scientific naturalism is also not even required for atheism, although it tends to be the flavor that we default to it here. So basically, we want to make sure that if somebody kind of thinks it's odd that, you know, if you get that question about can you have religion without God, know that there's a long tradition, both ancient and modern, of yes, we can have a religion without God, because religion is merely an attempt to answer A, the big questions of life, and B, to put into place the moral systems and community required to live a good life. And I will close the way I always do. Atheists believe in good because good works in non-mysterious ways. Thank you.